Chapter 547, Open Eyes. Ray's eyes slowly flicked open as he grunted in a slight whisper. His body felt a little stiff, almost as if he hadn't moved it in weeks. His vision felt a little blurry at first, but it soon acclimated to the light, and he opened them wide. As he parted his lips, he soon became capable of sensing his surroundings. Where is this? He expressed slight surprise as he sat up on the magnificent bed that he was currently on. It's so soft. And it smells so sweet. Ray could see that an invisible barrier surrounded the bed almost like a veil that covered the entire perimeter. He sensed particles of energy dancing in the air as well, and they had rejuvenating properties. Whoever put me here must have done so with good intentions, then. His thoughts slightly trailed as he shifted to the side of his bed and planted his 2 feet on the tiled ground. It felt warm. Ray looked above him, finding the entire room to be one of immaculate beauty. It was pure white, with golden designs etched all over the walls and ceilings. The beauty looked royal. Everything from the extravagant chandelier, to the paintings on the walls, and even the carpets and well-designed tiles, accompanied by the sparse furniture in the room, oozed pristine. He felt a little overwhelmed, just taking everything in. After taking a deep breath to calm himself, he lowered his head and focused on his body. Ray was tempted to stand, but he decided to postpone it until he could properly recollect his thoughts and understand his situation. What am I doing here exactly? He reached into his memories to find out everything that he could about himself, and his current situation. My name is Ray Schuyler. Average nobody on Earth who got transmigrated here with my classmates and was blessed with great power. He remembered his ascent to power, the journeys he led, the secret identities he created, the people he fought and killed and the allies he made on the way. He also remembered the loss he suffered. I nearly died back then, but... Yes, that's how. And, I lost consciousness. Right as Ader arrived. Ray placed his hand on his chin as he soon became up to speed with everything that had happened to him. Well, the only things that he was conscious of. He still wasn't certain about a lot of things, but there was only one place to start from. Status window. He muttered, almost instinctively. Name Ray Schuyler. Race human. Class singularity. Level 201. Life force, 3000. Monolevel, 9000. Combat ability, 5000. Stat points, 16,650. Skills. Alignment neutral good. You have done the impossible and stand at the precipice of power. As such, you now possess the interest of this world. As Ray took all of this in, he leaked out a small smile and nodded. Looks like everything is intact. I didn't just dream them up or imagine what happened. The feeling of dying twice, and nearly dying again was etched into his body, stuck in the deep recesses of his mind. The fear from back then still plagued him. While he had a calm facade, accompanied by a steady heartbeat and a fully stable body, he could feel the sensation lurking within his heart. The ever-present feeling of danger and unease. The divine beast had scarred him greatly, and while there were still a lot of thoughts to unpack, Ray thought it was best to unpack things one by one. Starting from this right here. He looked at the additional information in his status window and narrowed his eyes. So I have the interest of this world, huh? What is it? Some sort of sentient being. Ray closed his eyes and sighed. Based on all he had experienced, he already knew there had to be other worlds that existed out there. Beasts like Dagon and Ader came from a world different from H-Tray, and he came from Earth. He didn't know exactly how many worlds were out there, so he decided not to think too much about it. Is it possible that this power I have, everything that makes me special, is only exclusive to this world? When Ray thought about Dagon, or Ader, he couldn't help but imagine the kinds of creatures that could exist out of the reach of his current plane of existence. The same way accomplished martial artists on Earth would feel completely powerless when confronted with the warriors from H-Tray. It was possible that the powers within H-Tray would pale in comparison to another world. What would that mean for a singularity? For the strongest of the humans, or even the strongest of H-Tray? Could it be like a multiverse? Maybe. Maybe not. Suddenly, even the pursuit of strength, something as simple as that, became a complicated burden on Ray's mind. When he first came here, he had the sole desire to be very powerful. Never to get complacent and reach the pinnacle of strength so he wouldn't be threatened, that was his goal. But now, I don't know anymore. Even though he was barely able to beat Dagon, what if there was something stronger? What of the dragons? Where exactly did he fall under in the grand spectrum of power? I don't know anymore. A small sigh escaped his lips as he gazed emptily into space. The silence that filled his room continued only for a moment before Ray decided that he had gotten enough of moping around. Parting his lips, he called out for his familiar. Ader. Whoosh. In an instant, a dark silhouette appeared in front of Ray, opposite the corner of the bed where he chose to sit in. Within the darkness emerged a handsome young man in an all-black suit. With red hair swaying, revealing his crimson eyes, the man bowed slowly, showing his full courtesy and allegiance to Ray. Welcome back, Master. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. And so it begins. I have quite the plans for these two in this arc. Who knows what could happen? He he he. Chapter 548, Master and Familiar. Ader felt his heart race as he looked at his master's calm, smooth face. It had only been a brief moment since his master fell into his slumber, but for the familiar, it felt like an eternity. He had set up this room from scratch, using only the finest of materials at his disposal to make the ambience worthy enough for his master. It still felt too shabby for his tastes, but Ader had to attend to the other assignments that his master wanted him to handle, so he hoped that he would be forgiven for his inadequacies. For his master's protection, he made sure to erect a barrier that was invisible to the eyes of most. Regarding his master's sustenance, particles of energy containing nutrition that would energize the body filled the interior of the barrier. His master was never going to starve or go malnourished under his watch. In terms of hygiene, Ader made sure to personally. You look tired, Ader. Have you been working yourself very hard? Ray's voice interrupted the familiar's thoughts, causing him to nearly break down in tears. Master. If not for his mandated elegance, for the sake of his master's image, he would have broken down in front of Ray and completely displayed his full emotions. But Ader would never slight his master that way. Being the competent and capable familiar that he was, he simply bowed once more, before straightening his posture to give a refreshing smile. I am fine. Being in the presence of lowly vermin just drains me and of life. Really? Is it that serious? Ray gasped in shock. I guess I burdened you too much. It's just a figure of speech, Master. Haha, I'll be fine, so don't mind me. Just one look at Ray told Ader that his master was more than fine. He was literally glowing, his body carved like perfection. His plain face ensured that the rest of his body displayed their full glory. I was alerted the moment he woke up, but since I figured Master would desire some time alone, I let him have his time alone. It pleased Ader that Ray called for him not too long after he woke up, though. All right then. Thanks. Also. Please refrain from calling humans lowly vermin in their presence. I don't personally mind, but it's a little too late for that. Ader's thoughts trailed as he struggled to maintain his composure. Still, he nodded in recognition. Understood, Master. Ader found his smile broadening the more he looked at Ray, and it seemed the latter caught on to this. He shot the familiar a suspecting look, but Ader didn't mind at all. Master is yet to recognize how much he has changed. This is so much fun. Like a giddy child who knew a secret but was waiting for the others to recognize it, Ader decided to bottle everything in, masking everything with his calm smile. There's a lot we need to discuss. I have a lot of thoughts, and questions, concerning what happened especially after I fell asleep, but for now, I need to ask you something. Ray said, catching the attention of the loyal familiar. Yes? What is it, Master? Why? Am I naked right now? Also, why do you keep looking at my body like that? It's seriously creepy. Those are two questions, though. You get the point. Well. I mean, I just thought it would be better this way. Ader said with a nervous smile. The truth was that Ader had no real excuse for his actions. The particles that provided Ray nourishment could pass through clothing. The cleaning method that Ader used could also allow Ray to be dressed perhaps only in underwear, but still. In fact, wearing an attire, particularly an enchanted one, would offer Ray additional protection in case the barrier failed. When considering all these factors, it was a mystery why Ader didn't choose that route. Better, huh? Okay then. Ray said with a sigh. I guess I'll trust you. Whew. Ader sighed in relief. I wonder why I still have a connection to you, though. With most of my previous skills gone, I assumed you wouldn't be in my control any longer. As Ader heard Ray's words, he felt a little sting inside him. Master, come on. You can't just reduce our bond to a skill. He whispered, clutching his chest a little tightly. Really? Yeah. I mean, I made a pact with you down to our very souls. I am yours, just in the same way you are mine. That was why Ader was able to sense when tragedy struck his master. He left all his business and immediately rushed back to his master's side. Don't say it like that. It's weird. Ray sighed, placing his hand over his face while shaking his head. It almost seemed like he was embarrassed. Really? Yeah. If people heard that, they might start getting ideas. Okay then. Thank you, Ader. So if I get you right, you're still my familiar since we were bound together by the soul. That's right, Master. Is that the case with all familiars? Well, I'm not sure. Ader shrugged. I doubt it, though. The familiar deeply believed that what he had with his master was special. Not many other familiars could have the same kind of bond. What about those phoenixes? I didn't even bond with them, yet. There are some kinds of creatures who take a liking to an entity and attach their souls to that entity even without some sort of mutual agreement. Really? Yeah. I would also do the same even if we weren't bound like this. Says the guy who wanted to murk me when I first summoned him. You think I'd believe that? Once again, Ader felt a sting in his heart, clutching his chest tightly as he held back the tears that would have leaked out. That was before I recognized your greatness, Master. He yelled out. I, Ader, would never leave your side after experiencing your power. It seemed Ray didn't completely trust him, but Ader was being as sincere as he could be. His kind was known to be incredibly deceitful, and he was the very personification of the most evil kind of alignment. But he genuinely desired to serve Ray. What power! What greatness! I could barely even stop that beast. Ray suddenly spoke, his voice melancholic and his face crestfallen. A different atmosphere took over the room, and it was clear that his master had a lot on his mind. Ader maintained his smile regardless. You don't see this now, but your true power does not lie in the present or past. It is in the future. He narrowed his gaze on the somber boy. Within you is a seed. Perhaps the answer that I seek. That skill you possess. It could prove instrumental in allowing you to see the true nature of this world. Ader felt his heart racing as impatience nearly swallowed him whole. Just a bit longer. Once you reach the SSS tier in class, you'll finally be ready. Until then, I will do my best to guide and support you. Ray finally emerged from his sullen mood and looked at Ader's constant smile, reflecting the expression on his own face. Thank you very much, Ader. For what, Master? He asked, his face displaying slight surprise. Never before had he received a word of thanks from a master. Not once. The feeling was sublime. For everything. Thank you. For being by my side. At this point, Ader could no longer hold back his tears. They streamed down his face as he looked at his master's smile with pure bliss. No, Ray. Thank you. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I'll be traveling somewhere tomorrow, so I might not be able to write 5 chapters a day as I originally planned. But I'll do my best. Chapter 549, Speculation of Power. I see. So that's why I fell into sleep. Ray's expression was stoic as he uttered those words. He stared at Ader, who remained standing before him. The latter had just finished explaining the cause for Ray's sudden fall into unconsciousness. Well, now that Master is awake, it means your body has fully acclimated to the power you gained. Do you feel any different? This question was met with a slight shrug, after which Ray shook his head. No. It feels like I've always been like this. He murmured. Does that make any sense to you? Usually, when one receives a bunch of divine skills, both active and passives, you would expect certain changes with them. Perhaps the ability to sense the laws of the world, or some kind of difference in their perception and relation to everything around them would be visibly altered. But Ray felt nothing like that. Sure, his sensory abilities had been maximized to an incredible level, and his body felt free and completely his own, but other than that, he felt pretty much the same. Have your passive skills been toggled on yet? Oh, let me check. Ray went to his status window and realized, much to his embarrassment, that they were not turned on. Everything he was currently experiencing was merely a result of his base stats. I have 8 passive skills, all of which are SS tier. He rubbed his chin, going through each one. This was the first time he had more passive than active skills, but considering their effects, he wasn't complaining in the slightest. I have. And most of them functioned exactly as their name depicted. The magic supremacy and martial supremacy skills granted him the perfect body and mind to instantly activate and perform any magic spell or martial arts technique. Of course, he'd have to learn them and their functions, but a mere glance would be enough for him to replicate their effects. Coupled with my other skills, it's possible to even make spells or techniques of my own. Then, there was, which essentially made it so that his body wouldn't be affected by any negative status condition. But, considering how this is basically overlapping with my class privilege, it's pretty useless. I'll have to feed it to later. Made him pretty much immortal, which was also overlapping with another class privilege. That meant this would be another candidate. I need as many stats as possible, so any useless skill of mine will have to go towards that cause. What bothered him about this choice was that his class could eventually change and he would lose access to the immortality and resistance skills forever. What if his new class didn't have those perks? After all, his older classes had privileges that didn't carry over when he got a higher one. I only have this class and its privileges because this world apparently has an interest in me. What if it stops developing that interest? Then what? When Ray considered these things, he began to rethink his earlier decision. Maybe I'll just wait a little longer. If I'm in dire need of more stats, I'll feed them to his other skills, and involved a higher form of regeneration and growth, which he considered pretty neat. Since I have perfect regeneration, isn't it safe to get rid of the immortality skill? It essentially does the same thing. Ray thought to himself. As long as he didn't die in a single hit, he would fully recover. It was also a passive skill, so while it took mana anytime he wanted to use it, there wasn't a particular limit to its activation. I still have my class privileges too. As if to further convince him, he noticed the effects of End, both of which further rendered him unkillable. I have a divine form that essentially improves all my bodily functions and senses. I can detect all the energies around me and can fully augment my body as I desire it. I'm more durable too. In essence, I possess a perfect body, as perfect as it can get anyway. As if that wasn't enough, made sure he would always grow past any sudden adversity that his other skills failed to account for if given enough time. All I need is to survive it once, or to even be inflicted by it for a second or two, and my body will immediately adapt to it. It felt amazing how unkillable he had become. Adding that to my class privileges, which realistically speaking are probably not going anywhere anytime soon. I probably have nothing to worry about feeding the immortality and resistance skills to. The rest could stay, though, since they had a wider range of utility. The fact that I lost most of my more versatile skills and got these ones that have an emphasis on my survival means really didn't want me to perish, huh? Considering the nature of his fight at that time, he could understand why he was granted these particular skills. He also hadn't gotten his new class yet, so they wouldn't have been wasted back then. Well, that's in the past now. Ray used his fingers to select the skills he desired to feed into, and they instantly vanished from his list. I only have 13 skills now, huh? And how many stats did I gain from this? That seems a little too low, considering they're two divine skills. Ray thought to himself, but he restrained his face from depicting any sign of concern. Could it be that grants less stat points the more I use it? Maybe. Maybe not. None of that mattered at the moment, though. There would always be opportunities to test out more of his theories, but now that he had taken the first step, what remained was to finally incorporate his new stats with his skills. I now have a total of 46,550 stat points at my disposal. How do I spend them? There was no real point in placing any in his life force, considering his array of skills and class privileges that pretty much dealt with all his problems regarding that area. But my last opponent was able to interfere with my skills to an extent. I have no idea what will pop up next, so I should still invest in it. With that in mind, Ray added 10,000 stat points to his life force stat, and then placed a whopping 20,000 into his mana level stat. For some reason, I don't have a mana recovery skill. Divine skills really consume a lot of mana to use, so I'll need as much as I can get. He placed the rest in his combat ability stat, successfully spending all of his stat points. It's funny how I was so glad to see a few hundred stats in my system window. But now, a small smile formed on his face as he looked at the screen before him. Life Force, 13,000. Mana level, 29,000. Combat ability, 21,550. Stat points, 0. Now I've gotten a lot stronger. When the next enemy came, he would be more prepared no matter what. Now that I've sorted that out, I can finally address the things that have been on my mind since I woke up. Ray raised his head and looked at Ader with a narrowed gaze. Exactly how long was I asleep for? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I'm sure there are a lot of things on Ray's mind, so let's give it time to unpack. Please be patient with the MC and plot. Thanks. Chapter 550, A New Perspective. 2 months. Are you serious? Ray's eyes were wide open as he heard those words from Ader. He had expected a few days, perhaps 1 or 2 weeks tops, but this new revelation was a complete subversion of his expectations. Well, 2 months and about 3 weeks, but yes. Ader added, a strained smile planted on his face. The seated boy's eyes turned even more bloodshot as his familiar added more fuel to the fire. That means I've spent over 6 months in H-Tray, and... Wait, that's not the most important thing right now. He didn't have a sense of urgency before, since he wanted to take his time to fully unpack and process everything that had happened to him, but now... Now he could feel his heart racing like crazy. Jumping to his feet in an instant, he didn't waste any time before activating all of his passive skills in order to gear up for what would come next. The moment he did so, though, everything around and about him changed forever. At first, it felt like something was surging through his body, like currents of electricity, fused into his very being. He soon found those to be the cells within his body. He was connected to every last one. His mind expanded beyond what he previously perceived as normal, and he was perfectly with sync with every facet of his body. Not only did he feel much stronger than before, but his perspective on everything within and without was completely altered. Ray could see the world from a 360 degrees angle, having complete awareness of his surroundings, and this was without his domain skill activated. He felt everything from the tension of the air, to the particles that floated around him. Every detail in the room was burned into his memory and perfectly registered, and he processed everything within a tiny fraction of a moment. The further away things were, the less details he had of them, but everything within the room was completely assimilated into his mind. It felt like a whole stream of knowledge was imparted into him, and that was only the beginning. These particles in the air. Their mana. He could not only detect every strand of mana, as if they were visible elements of reality, but he could also detect their flow, trajectory, and origin. Even when he closed his eyes, he perceived a completely different world, one where there was blackness, but the outline of everything around him still remained. He could perfectly sense things, but it felt different. It wasn't worse. Just different. The difference between his two senses were like night and day, sort of like infrared and normal vision. The contrast that they both offered gave him a new and different perspective of the room around him. I should get used to them somehow. Master. If I may speak, could you perhaps be in need of something like this? Upon hearing Ader's voice, Ray raised his head. He realized he was holding onto his forehead while constantly narrowing his gaze as if trying to find a balance between both aspects of his senses. Upon looking at Ader, however, he was presented with a solution. That is. Ray's eyes slightly spasmed as he looked at the item that Ader gracefully presented to him. It was an eye patch, a well-made one at that. The eye patch was jet black in color, but what was strange about this item was the way its color remained constant in Ray's confused eyes. Anytime he blinked, the colors around would contrast and clash, driving his senses into a constant state of confusion. The reason was due to the contrasting nature of both kinds of senses, and also due to his inexperience in managing them. Having everything all at once wasn't particularly ideal for him, and he found it difficult to strike a balance. But, out of everything around, the eye patch was the only thing that had a constant color. "What is that?" Ray asked, slightly wincing as he grabbed the item. "Something I happened to find somewhere. It has no mana at all, and it's made of a completely different material from what you should be able to see through." According to Ader, the eye patch would block one eye from being able to see through anything, which would render it into a constant state of the no sight sense. His open eyes would then take on the present sight sense. Master can augment his body so he doesn't need to blink in his right or left eye. As for your other eye, you can use this eye patch to cover it, so it constantly remains in dark mode. Dark mode, huh? I see what you did there. Ray muttered as he stared at the eye patch again. Dark mode and light mode, referring to when he shut his eyes and when he opened them respectively, would coexist at the same time, according to what Ader proposed. But wouldn't that make things worse? They'll clash, won't they? Why don't you try it out first? Ader said with a knowing smile, almost as if he wanted to surprise Ray. Ignoring his surprise at the fact that Ader knew about the specifics of his skills and how they affected him, Ray decided to trust his familiar. So, he wore the eye patch. Woa. Much to his surprise, the clashing problem was gone. Not only could he see the world in dark mode, but strangely enough, he could also see it in light mode. It was a perfect blend between the two. It made no sense to Ray, so he looked at his familiar for an explanation. "You're still very inexperienced when it comes to adjusting your divine senses to this world, so the best thing is to mitigate the effects of both by allowing them to overlap." As a result, Ray's sight had returned to what would be deemed normal for the most part. You can take your time to slowly acclimate to the state of things. Then, at moments, you can alternate between light and dark mode by shutting off your vision or ensuring both your eyes do not need to blink. Once again, the level of detail by which Ader spoke showed some expertise in the matter. "How do you know so much?" "Pardon my impudence, Master. But, I genuinely do not remember," Ader replied. "I must have had the experience in a previous world." Ray slightly tensed his gaze on Ader as he heard this explanation. It did seem a little odd, but after recognizing all that he had done to explain and even solve Ray's ailment, it made no sense for Ader to be lying. Plus, they were connected by the soul, so there was no doubt about how genuine he was being. "All right. I believe you," he sighed, shrugging a little as he smiled. "There's a bunch of stuff I don't understand and I would like to know, but let's take it one step at a time." "Thank you, Master." Ader bowed his head even lower. After shaking his head a little, heaving a little sigh, he walked past Ader and tapped his shoulder. "Enough with that. I really should get down to business." His dark hair swayed ever so slightly as clothing began to appear all over his body. He instantly donned a long dark coat, with a black attire and matching trousers. His shoes were of the same color, perfectly blending well with his dark hair while contracting his slightly paler skin. His outfit had traces of red lined around them, however, and this intricate design made both dominant colors pop out. Where do we start? Well, I left a certain friend behind in a particular dungeon for nearly 3 months. Ray said as he turned back to see Ader smiling at him. Let's hope she doesn't skin me alive for the delay. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Well, at the very least he remembers Esm. I wonder if you've all noticed anything strange about Ray yet. Chapter 551, A Brief Search. With Ray no longer having any real spatial skills at his disposal, getting to the Grand Calamity dungeon would be a hassle. He would have to locate the place somehow, and with the obscure nature of the entire structure, that was going to prove to be an extremely difficult task. At least, that was how it was supposed to be. Voyage. With a mere outstretched hand, and a thought invoked in his mind, a swirling purple gateway appeared right in front of him. Looks like the spell activated, which means it's going to lead to my determined coordinates, he said with a smile as he stared at the portal. Having an really is useful. Not only did he have access to a variety of abilities that would have previously been represented as skills, but he could cast them without much effort thanks to the effects of his passive skill. I can probably still do stuff like summoning, healing, as well as other neat tricks. That makes this magic my most versatile ability at the moment. Yes, using magic had its downsides compared to skills. For one, each skill already had a specialized function, so there was no need to sort through its multifarious functions in order to get just one effect. Activation of skills had to be a lot faster and direct. However, since they took more space in the limited slot of skills he was allowed to have under, Ray felt having one umbrella skill more than made up for the non-specificity of magic. Also, using spells has been somewhat mitigated thanks to. If I had to start chanting spells or learning their intricacies before using all the abilities I previously had as skills, this would be a nightmare. Thankfully, having both active and passive skills relating to magic made his use of it as easy as possible. It also helped that they were in the divine tier, so there really was no ceiling on what he could or could not do with magic. Since I have enough mana to use it, then there really is no complaint here. He found his lips slowly curling to form a smile. The glowing portal that stood in front of him was a testament to his current reasoning. His exposed right eye reflected the purple light, while the black eye patch shielded his left from any of the radiant display. Ader stood right behind, watching his master's display of power. Based on how he fidgeted, it was clear that Ader was trying his hardest to render an applause to his master for swiftly grasping his sudden switch from the use of skills to spells. Let's go, Ray said, slightly turning his head to look at Ader. The latter instantly nodded, and they both stepped into the purple portal, instantly leaving the pristine comfort of their room to a dreary and ancient mansion. VWUM. The transition was instant, and the scenery transitioned into the ground floor of the Grand Calamity class dungeon. Looks like we're here, Ray said with a sigh as he looked around him. I was briefed about everything that happened, so I should have expected this much. It seems your classmates weren't exaggerating at all when they spoke about its size. Ray flinched a little when he heard Ader mention his classmates, but he quickly recovered while maintaining his stoic demeanor. Yeah. It's quite massive, isn't it? The ancient stone walls, incredibly high ceilings, and long flight of stairs, all of which greeted their sight, seemed a little too dreary for comfort. It almost feels like a new experience, Ray muttered as he stepped forward, looking around him with misty breaths escaping his lips. Maybe it's because there aren't thousands of people behind me. Perhaps the Ray who stepped in here the last time isn't the same one who is here now. As Ader added those words, still standing still behind him, Ray found himself chuckling a little. "Well, you're not wrong," he muttered. His sight made him aware of everything around him, so he could see everything in a sense. The walls, their texture, their moldy scent, the properties that made them up. He could sense them as he took everything in. "It feels bigger." Ray closed his two eyes, allowing the darkness to shroud the brilliance of the world around him. In dark mode, he viewed everything as mere outlines, so he could easily see the structure of everything without being distracted by the details of their properties. He could also see through barriers and layers, so he could see the upper rooms, and the surrounding areas. He couldn't detect Esm's presence despite spreading his perception as far as he possibly could. "Looks like the whole structure is bigger than my base sensory range." He made a wry smile, opening his right eye to return his sight to normal mode. Then, his mana bubbled up as he activated the soul skill that could assist him in such a predicament. It almost felt like providence how he now had to rely on the very skill he obtained from this place. The moment he activated this skill, what felt like a pulse of invisible and intangible energy radiated from Ray's position, instantly consuming every facet of the Grand Calamity class dungeon. It was so easy and effortless, reaching into the deep recesses of this place that had thousands of rooms and corners. "I can go even further, but there's no need to." Since Ray could sense literally everything within the Grand Calamity class dungeon, he could tell that there was no one present in it, friend or foe. The whole place seemed to have been cleaned up as well. Ray did notice one thing, though, and by instantly swapping out zones, he was able to send himself and Ader right to the location where he left Esm. "She isn't here." Ader's words echoed in the air as Ray looked in front of him, at the writing on the walls that caused his heart to skip a beat. Once he was done reading the writing for the umpteenth time, a small smile formed on his face, followed by a bead of sweat. The writing read, "I am coming for you." "Yeah," he muttered, chuckling as he felt a peaceful sensation wash over his heart. Something told him Esm was probably fine. "Let's go back." Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Prepare for her return. Or, perhaps, hee. I shall say nothing. As for Ray's reactions, they do seem odd. Chapter 552, Consequences of Privilege. "I'm worried." Ray's face still had the same stoic demeanor as he had been displaying since he got a grasp of what was happening around him. His heart was still, and he didn't look the least bit concerned about anything. Not about his classmates, Esm, or the other person he couldn't afford to think about at the moment. His mind was still, and his body acted accordingly. But somewhere within him, perhaps one could call it his soul or conscience, Ray knew he was being dishonest. "A decent perk of this new body is that I feel fully connected to myself, so I can choose to halt natural reactions that may cause me to lose myself. But, I suppose that is also quite disadvantageous." After all, he was more connected with himself more than ever, so he knew this was all false. Still, he couldn't afford to let it go. Not yet. Whoosh. Ray opened a portal and gave one final glance around the dungeon, using his whole senses to even check the areas around the building. He found no one present, though. "It's been over 2 months since I fell asleep. I don't know when she left this place, but isn't that more than enough time to reach me if she comes at full speed?" These thoughts echoed in his head, nearly tempting him to begin an active investigation for Esm. But no. No, wait. Ray stopped himself as he held his head while sighing. What am I doing right now? What am I thinking? I shouldn't be too impulsive. Let's try to get a full grasp on everything that happened first. He winced a little, realizing quite a few of his previous actions had been a lot more sporadic than now. His choice with as soon as he woke up was one. I'm beginning to regret that one. But I made the right choice, didn't I? Or did I? For a moment, he stared at Ader, who simply looked back unassumingly. Should I know? No, wait. He slightly held his head and sighed once again. Ray felt a conflict somewhere within him. However, before the overflowing feelings fear, anxiety, pain, sadness, worry, regret, among many others overwhelmed him, they were instantly suppressed. In an instant, he felt nothing but a slight wave of relief that made him a lot less tense than before. What's going on? Ray wondered to himself as he narrowed his gaze. Isn't even active, yet why am I like this? Is this some kind of subconscious wall? Give me a moment, Ader. He raised his hand and the portal he created instantly vanished. Something isn't right. Ader nodded and remained silent, watching his master as he figured it out on his own. Status window. Ray muttered, letting everything pop up before him. Name Ray Skylar. Race human. Class singularity. Level 201. Life force, 13,000. Mana level, 29,000. Combat ability, 21,550. Stat points, 0. Skills. Skills. Alignment neutral. You have done the impossible and stand at the precipice of power. As such, you now possess the interest of this world. Something is off. His eyes narrowed as he looked at his stats. Why has my alignment suddenly changed? It wasn't like that moments ago. As soon as Ray began to have worrying thoughts, something within him had it all suppressed in an instant. What the hell? What's doing that? It wasn't him. Yes, he had complete control over his body, and he indeed ensured he would remain calm at most times. But he needed to actively perform this trick on his body, which made the passive effect of still useful. But this was a different sensation. It didn't seem to stem from his body, but something like his mind, perhaps even deeper. I don't get it. Is an external force affecting me? I'm supposed to be immune to. Negative. Hold on. Ray's eyes widened as he instantly had a gnawing suspicion. One glance at Ader's unassuming smile, seeing as he nodded slowly, told Ray that he was onto something. Class privileges. He managed to say before yet another wave of relief washed over his body. Every time it happened, a subtle change occurred within Ray that he wasn't aware of. Only when the constant changes built up did the slow transformation become much clearer. Ray could see it now, he was becoming less like himself. Less human. And it's all because of this. Name singularity. Tier S tier. Cause you have done the impossible, defying the balance of this world and forever changing its nature. Your existence is an aberration, and your power has reached a frightening degree. This world's very fabric is forever altered by your existence. 50 plus subsequent stat points for every level up. Perfect resistance to appraisal and any other ability of the sort. Equalizer effect can be activated. Immunity to curses or all ailments and negative status conditions in the world. Soul preservation is in effect. Nothing in this world can kill you, as the world itself offers you guardianship. Effect can now be available to you. Do these human feelings qualify as negative status conditions? Is that why they're being suppressed? His worry about asthma, his concern for his classmates, and the overwhelming cluster of emotions that threatened to break loose within him. All of them were recognized as harmful by the system, so they were being blocked off. What's the deal with this Ader? This is for the best, master. You no longer need to be concerned about those vermin, so you can set your mind on the more important matters. The moment he heard his classmates being referred to in such a derogatory manner, he felt a surge of annoyance rise up within him. But, that was instantly fizzled out, replaced by relief. I can't get angry too? What the hell? Before, he had chalked it up to his desire to calmly assess the situation one step at a time, but now Ray recognized his situation as completely different. The system is regulating my emotions. How is that ever a good thing? Emotions tend to get in the way of good judgment, master. If you are unshackled by them, perhaps that would yield the more optimal result. No. You're wrong. Once Ray raised his voice, he was suppressed once again. Damn it. Are you all right, master? I'm not, damn it. It keeps interfering. Even the fear that Ray was supposed to feel, as he watched vestiges of his personality slip away, was absent. His heart wasn't racing quickly, and his mind was perfectly calm. Just how many emotions would it deem to be negative? Why qualify emotions as negative status conditions to begin with? Perhaps it's because you are more in sync with your entire self now. Surely, even the system recognizes how detrimental your emotions can be to your development. Ray's eyes widened as he looked at Ader's mask of a face. Somewhere within him, he began to ask a very fundamental question. If Ader is an advocate for this, then does that mean he's the same? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What do you think about this development? Do you think Ader is right? Chapter 553, Consequences of Privilege. When considering things logically, humans are often bound by emotion. Feelings of lethargy, or mental fatigue, perhaps depression and other negative states, tend to get in the way of productivity. Objectively, humans could function for 12 straight hours being productive throughout, as long as they had the sustenance and the barest minimum of rest to keep them going. 8 hours of sleep, then 4 hours embedded in chunks between the 12 hours of constant productive work. These 4 hours would include feeding, excretion, resting, and the likes. Every day. All day. Humans could achieve so much if they dedicated 12 hours of their time to their task. But that is rarely the case with people. How much smarter would the average student be if they constantly dedicated 12 hours to their studies for the years they spent in school? But, more often than not, they do not do this. How much more money would be made by the average man if he chose not to take time off work, or indulge in needless breaks? They simply cannot help this, however. Because inbuilt within humans is the poison of emotion, that makes it impossible to be productive 100% of the time. There's always something that interferes with the constant stream of productivity. Positive or negative, they still interfere with the necessary activities. Students engage in pointless discourse, play games, watch movies, and fret over those they cultivate feelings for. Workers get burnout and mental fatigue, even if their physical self is in a perfect state, if they monotonously focus over a single task for too long. These shackles of emotions, especially the more negative aspects, make them overall harmful to productivity. As such, they ought to be culled. To make the ideal person one who would be perfectly aligned to their goals, useless feelings would need to be eliminated. Permanently. Is that really how you feel, Ader? Like I said, Master. Feelings are irrelevant when it comes to this matter. As Ray stared down on Ader, constantly having his rising feelings being suppressed by the system, he finally loosened his clenched fist and sighed. No, you're wrong. Ray turned away from Ader, but that didn't mean he couldn't see the expression on his face. What do you mean by that, Master? My emotions play a key role in how I function. Ray sighed, raising his head as he stared at the ceiling. It was why he tried his hardest not to rely on too much. My fear of the future and my anxiety allows me to critically examine everything around me to make what I deem to be the best decision. It didn't matter that the process would take longer than a more automated version of himself. He would be able to act on what he thought was best after examining all the possibilities presented to him. That was his preferred method of operation. Before I took my first life in this world, I had a long series of deliberations, and then I finally made that choice. Yes, he used to make it easier to kill, but the choice was made before the skill was activated. As such, he bore all responsibility for his actions. Regret and pain. My aversion to those allows me to think a lot of my actions through before I engage in them. They also allow me to learn from my mistakes and make better choices. Whenever his plans went belly up, he would feel the pain that came with it and prevent such a thing from happening again. Losing access to those emotions will make me act without consequence. Ray could already see the signs. His decision to feed two of his skills to was indeed something he was beginning to regret, but even that emotion was slowly slipping from his grasp. Perhaps it would have ultimately been the best decision, and this suppression made me get to it faster, but I would have thought things through a lot more if I was myself. Something about the system controlling his emotions, even without his consent, made the whole process seem wrong. At some point, I'll stop being myself. My worrying, scared, insecure, but also critical, skeptical, and caring self. They'll be gone. What would be left could only be described as a machine, a hollow version of himself. I don't want that. And I don't think you want that either. For a moment, Ader remained the same. He didn't say anything, but keenly stared at Ray with glassy eyes and a mask-like expression. Then, he raised his brows and asked, "Why do you think that?" Ray smiled as he heaved a sigh, his dark gaze piercing Ader's crimson one. "Because I would no longer be the master you swore loyalty to." Upon hearing this, Ader quickly broke into a smile and nodded, even going as far as rendering a round of applause to Ray. "What a splendid answer, Master." He beamed brightly. "You never cease to impress me." Yet. Ray's eyes widened slightly as he looked at Ader's surprisingly pleased expression. He expected some other kind of reaction, not this. "I thought you were on board with the whole emotional suppression." "No way. I feel all kinds of emotions, Master. I'm not some kind of heartless monster. Whenever I cause chaos and calamity, I revel in the satisfaction that brings me." Once again, Ray was reminded of the kind of entity he was speaking to, a chaotic evil beast. "Haha. Is that so?" He strained a smile. "Oh, of course, I derive my greatest sense of fulfillment from serving you, Master." Ray nodded, still not removing the forced smile on his face. It almost seemed like he didn't believe Ader. "So why were you trying to convince me otherwise? Why were you advocating for this suppression as if it's the best option?" Ader's smile slowly vanished as he adopted a more serious demeanor. "There are two reasons for that. The first and most obvious is that I wanted to test your resolve and make you face the emotions that you are subconsciously trying to avoid." Ader was no fool. He had been observing Ray since he fell asleep, and even after he woke up, so he already knew how Ray didn't want to address the tragedies that had befallen the city. Your first instinct was to check your status window, and to distract yourself with the comfort of your strength. That was not something the system prompted. It was an action you enacted of your own free will. He started. The system wasn't controlling Ray's actions, but merely regulating his emotions. Yes, some of those actions would be a direct consequence of his emotions or absence thereof, but certain choices were Ray's burden to bear alone. Your decision to use is something I didn't know of until you mentioned it, and it indeed points to the flaw of the system's methods. It's something I disagree with wholeheartedly. Ader's smile returned, and he nodded at Ray. Emotions are necessary for growth, Master. They're the catalyst for change. It makes me happy that you recognize that. The positive feeling that Ray got from Ader's words were, thankfully, not suppressed by the system. He wanted to say something, perhaps a word of thanks, but before he fully opened his lips, Ader continued speaking. The second reason is because I suspected it was probably best for you to see some positive aspects of this suppression. After all. Sighing, he stared seriously into Ray's eyes, a sullen expression plaguing his face. For a moment, tense silence took reign. It didn't last long, though. You can't do anything about your class privileges. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Well, this was a slightly philosophical chapter, and while I'm pretty neutral about the results, I'd like to know what you think about the overall message.